everyone, my name is Evie Lupine. Welcome back to my channel, and today I have another video for you all. Today we are going to be talking about the role of surprise in BDSM. This was inspired by a question I received during one of my weekly live streams. By the way, if you didn't know, I have live streams here on YouTube Friday nights. That is 6 p.m. on the West Coast, 9 p.m. on the East Coast, and it's a great way for people to come and ask questions and get advice. And this time around, somebody brought up that they were negotiating for a scene, and the partner that they were going to be playing with wanted to have something where they would be surprised. They didn't want to know what was going to be happening to them. And this person, as the top, wasn't really sure how to make that happen. They weren't really sure if they were comfortable with it or how to go about doing it. And so that is basically our starting point for this video, and hopefully this will be a complete answer to that question. What I want to talk about today is how you can construct ethical, consensual, mutually enjoyable scenes where the bottom doesn't always know ahead of time everything that's going to be happening to them. I want to go over some reasons why people enjoy this type of play, common pitfalls, negotiation tools, all of that good stuff. So let's go ahead and start there. I first want to talk about why people might enjoy this type of play. Now, it might surprise you, but people like the idea of being able to give up control. One of the big things that a lot of bottoms really connect to about bottoming is the idea of being able to give up their body or spirits or mind or something else to a more powerful force, and that force then acts upon them. They have no say in what's going on, they have no way to control it, potentially even no way to stop it if they wanted to do something without safe words. And so if somebody is interested in that type of play, if they really want to emphasize the whole having no control thing, it would be obvious that you would then gravitate towards negotiating for scenes where you just say, I don't want to know what's going to happen to me. And of course as well, going along with this, studies have shown that fear and arousal can be linked. So it would make sense that playing with these sorts of elements may also be a turn on for some people. Now as well, there are people who enjoy this type of play, not because it's any sort of turn on for them or because it's about giving up control, but simply because they don't like being weighed down by the stereotypical negotiation process. They don't like having to do all the paperwork, they don't like having to go through the checklist, go through in minute detail every single thing that's going to happen. For them, having these really detailed discussion kind of takes away the mystique or the fun out of doing play. So for them, being able to have a scene where they can go, oh, don't tell me what's going to happen, is just a shortcut to be able to get to a scene. However, simply saying, don't tell me what's going to happen, do whatever you want, is not a complete negotiation process as far as my risk profile is concerned. Now, this is not to say that you can't have this type of scene. In fact, if you have an ongoing partnership, if you've negotiated for consensual non-consent, if you have a long-term BDSM dynamic, something along those lines, people do oftentimes have scenes where they go to their partner and say, hey, I want to have a scene. I'll just leave it up to you, do whatever you'd like, because they have that established trust. They know the person they're playing with. They have, in other situations, taken the time to understand the person they're playing with, taken the time to understand scene energy, preferences, limits, boundaries, understanding nonverbal communication in scene, all of these things that usually take quite a bit of time and practice to sync up on. And so it's not generally advisable that if you're playing with new people or somebody you haven't played with before, that you just go up and say, hey, I want to have a scene and I want it to be a total surprise. That is a great way to have a scene go terribly wrong, and there's a couple of reasons for that. The first thing is that to me, this very much sounds like the I have no limits phrase that you hear from a lot of people, especially when they're newer in the scene and they don't really know better. It's not that you're literally communicating that you have no limits, but if the only thing that you're doing is saying, I want to be surprised, and you don't have that established relationship pattern, if you haven't told somebody what your preferences and boundaries are and you're just leaving it at that, it is so easy to end up in a situation where nobody's going to like what's going to happen. Another thing that I haven't really seen brought up yet is that this puts all of the pressure on the dom or the top to completely construct the scene by themselves. I think there's this misconception out there that if bottoms or subs didn't put limits on things, that they would just all run rampant and they would do whatever they wanted, and they're all like sitting there twirling their mustaches hoping for the time when somebody will finally allow them to do whatever they want without recourse. And to be fair, there are certainly some unethical people that act that way, but for the most part, people who are the sorts you would actually want to be playing with want to know a little bit about what their partners enjoy. They want to know what the limits are, what the boundaries are, yes, but also about what you enjoy, what you're looking forward to, what the goals of the scene are. And if you're not giving any additional information about what that looks like, it's going to be very, very difficult for any top or dom, no matter how experienced they are, to just magically make a perfect scene out of thin air. Somewhat related to this is the fact that a lot of people really enjoy the idea of being ravished. They want to have a more powerful force come in and take them by the hand and do things to them that are depraved in exactly the right way for the right amount of time with the right soundtrack and mood lighting and room temperature. And they want to have all of that without having to say anything about it. They basically want a telepath to be their play partner. And unfortunately, as far as I know, those don't really exist. And I understand why. It's really, really hard to talk about fantasies. It can be difficult to talk about what your desires are. It's hard to be vulnerable with people, especially when you're first getting to know them. But you can't go into a scene expecting somebody to recreate the fantasy in your head without any further input. People are not mind readers, and they don't know you as well as you know yourself. And if you're thinking that you're going to be able to go into a scene getting this sort of fantasy ravishment experience, that negotiating what that means to you, what that looks like to you, it's probably not going to turn out the way that you think, because again, everybody has different reasons for being in a BDSM. Everybody has different things that they enjoy, and what works for you may not work for the next person, and vice versa. Something as well that I see commonly associated with this is with newer people in the scene. You might know or feel like you could be a submissive or a bottom, and that you like the idea of BDSM, but you might not have anything specifically that you know is really hot to you or things that you want to try out. And so rather than going through a process of introspection and trial and error and doing like smaller scenes at first, people sometimes kind of hope that if they can just say to somebody, you know, do whatever you want to me, I want it to be a surprise, that somehow the like dom or top is going to magically know exactly all of the scene elements that they should be using to create something this person's going to enjoy. And that's, again, not typically how it works, because everybody has different things that they enjoy. If you are somebody who is newer to the scene and you're not really sure what you want yet, you're not really sure what you like, rather than biting off more than you can chew and diving into things that are going to be really complicated that you have no control over, it's much, much, much better if you take things one step at a time. You negotiate for very specific scenes where you know ahead of time exactly what to expect, so that way you can put that kind of in the back of your brain, put that into your filing cabinet, so you can remember later what does work for you, so you can construct future scenes around that. Now, this is not to say that there are no tops and no doms out there that would ever want to play with elements of surprise. This is not to say that no tops or no doms enjoy being able to construct scenes on their own. However, it would typically be considered a red flag if a dom or a top were to approach a potential bottom and simply say, I want to have a scene with you, it's going to be a surprise, or I'm not going to tell you what's going to happen. Red flag, usually not the best sign in the world. So that's one of the reasons why having a little bit more of a detailed negotiation process, even if it's just a little bit more detailed, is so important. Because that is what helps you separate the unethical people from the ethical people. The people who want to use this as a way of having scenes so they can do whatever they want without recourse, versus the people who enjoy this element of play but that want to do it in a way where everybody involved is going to have a good time at the end. But what does this all mean? I've been talking a lot about why maybe this isn't the best idea in the world, or maybe some quote unquote bad reasons for getting into this type of play. Does that mean that nobody should do it, or that we should negotiate everything to death in order to be safe, and that we should remove all the mystery and all of the fun out of play? No, absolutely not. If you guys couldn't tell, I run an educational BDSM channel, and I'm very passionate about people being able to practice informed, consensual BDSM. Hopefully give you guys some extra tools that you can use when you are negotiating these types of things, and maybe help you understand some things that perhaps you hadn't even thought of before. Now, ultimately, your risk profile is your risk profile. You can decide to charge into things and do whatever the hell you want, not negotiate in detail, and if that works for you, that's great. I am glad things did not go poorly. But there are some additional tools that you can use with negotiation practices that don't have to be super detailed in order to get this type of scene and have it go more along the lines of what you would like to have happen. My first suggestion, for lack of a better term, I have called pick a mix. If somebody has a better term than this, please let me know. But this is my preferred favorite method for negotiation. Basically, what you do for this is either as a group, as a duo, top and bottom together, you come up with a list of elements you would want to have happen in a scene. The bottom as well can write a list independently if they're worried about being influenced by the doms at the top's preferences, and then give that to the dom at the top for them to look over. And depending on the type of scene, the length, the location, other details like that, you would have this be between, say, 20 and 30 elements. And then from there, when the scene happens, the dom picks, say, 2 to 10 of those elements to include in the scene and really emphasize. So you are getting the process of talking about what your desires are, what your goals are, but ultimately exactly what ends up happening and in what combination and everything else ends up being a surprise. So you have a little bit more detail, a little bit more control, but you still have that surprise element that a lot of people are after. And what you write down on this list can be pretty much anything. This could be types of play, this could be role play elements, this could be emotional states you want to have achieved. Now, if you do want to do the emotional part of this, what I would suggest, if you are playing with a newer person to you, or you're playing with maybe new elements, to include a suggestion of what helps you get to that feeling. So for example, if you say, I want to feel humiliated, give an example of what helps you feel humiliated. So maybe I feel humiliated when I am forced to be a human lamp. You know, fill in the blank, whatever it is for you, and just give some examples. So you're giving your top, your dom, more feedback about what you want out of a scene, but ultimately the choices about what are in that scene is up to the dom and the top, and again, has all of those surprise elements that a lot of people are looking for. My second suggestion is mindfucks. I have mentioned this before in other videos. I still don't have a standalone video for it. I promise I will be making that at some point. But basically, to summarize for the sake of this video, when you guys were little, during Halloween, did you ever play that game where there would be like a mystery substance in like a black bag, and you had to like reach your hand in it without looking, and you had to guess what it was, and like you couldn't tell if it was like spaghetti or rat guts or something, and it was like terrifying because you didn't really know what to expect? That's basically what a mindfuck is. A mindfuck is more or less a more adult version of that sort of thing. It's a way that you can have play, have scenes where you are delivering elements in unexpected ways. And this is actually a great way as well if you're interested in being able to do things that actually wouldn't be safe to do literally. So this is kind of a way of having a bottom know what's going to happen to them, but then doing it in unexpected ways. So for example, you could dip a back of a knife or a credit card in really, really ice cold water and run it across their throat to trick them into believing that you are cutting their throat open. Or you could have a warm liquid as a substitute for potentially drawing warm blood. There's a million and one different ways that you can take mindfucks, and if you are interested in this type of play, I highly recommend you do some of your own research. But suffice to say, you can actually negotiate for scenes where a bottom knows what's going to happen to them, knows that you know their limits and their boundaries and their safe words and everything, and then you go ahead and do things where they are not exactly expecting how it's actually going to happen. So there was a scene that I actually saw one time where somebody was doing a mindfuck, and this was actually during a presentation at KinkFest that was about this type of play. And in that, the bottom partner had a hard limit around mice. They had like a mice phobia. They didn't want to touch them, they didn't want to be around them. But they did a scene where they had a hood over their head and they couldn't see what was happening. And the dom forced her hand into this crate where she had been made to believe, based on like sound cues and like other things in the room, that there was like an actual live mouse in there. Even though they had explicitly negotiated and he knew that her limits involved no mice, she still had that moment of fear of like, oh God, I'm like being forced to like touch this mouse, and there's live mouse in here, and oh my God, I have to touch this mouse. Even though there was no mouse, it was basically like one of those fuzzy purse attachments. Like, you ever seen those like round fuzzy balls? Like, that's what it was. But because it had been so mentally built up, she kind of tricked herself into believing something was happening that wasn't really happening. And that's a great tool for somebody who wants surprise or wants to have a sensation of loss of control in their scenes. And the third one, the final one I want to bring up, is something of a variant on the first suggestion. I call this controlled randomization. And like the first suggestion, this borrows from opt-in versus opt-out negotiation practices. I do have a video about that. Link to it will be down below if you're not familiar with that terminology. And basically, this is a way of going through and itemizing a list of scene elements that you want to decide whether or not you have control over. Is keeping your clothes on important to you? How about being in a really hot room versus being in a really cold room? You can go through and talk in as much or as little detail as you want with the partner about what things you do and do not want to have a say in, which again goes to, one, helping the top or dom understand what your preferences and goals are, but also allowing the bottom to be able to have a sense of loss of control, have a sense of not having a full authority over what's going on, and it's a pretty good compromise, again, especially for a lot of newer partnerships. This goes beyond just merely talking about limits, because honestly, the framework doesn't even really have to be about limits. You can have preferences that have nothing to do with limits whatsoever, and simply giving that feedback, having the opportunity to talk about that with a partner is so important. And even if you decide to say, hey, I don't want to have control over this, going and talking with a partner about why that is can do so much for helping the person know what kind of scene you're hoping to get. Now, no matter what it is that you decide to do with play, whether it be from one of the suggestions I've just given or from something that's more related to your own style and experience, the outcome of a scene is largely based on the quality of the negotiation, no matter how detailed it is, be it 10 minutes of negotiation or 2 hours. It comes from more the connection that you have with your partner, the kind of honesty you're able to give them, and what things you decide to share. If you don't take the time during negotiation to talk to your partner about why you want to play with them, what sort of scenes that you enjoy having, what your turn-ons are, your likes, your dislikes, etc., all of those things, it just makes it so much harder for somebody to truly understand who you are, why you are playing with them, and what sort of scene that you can have together. Everyone has different motivations and different reasons for being into kink. Again, nobody is a mind reader. If what you really want is an over-the-knee spanking scene, please feel empowered to ask for that. Ultimately, if it is really for you about feeling nervous, not feeling like you can really truly say what your needs are, practicing that, becoming more comfortable with yourself, becoming more in tune with yourself, understanding your motivations in kink will go so far into having better and more fulfilling scenes. Now, as one very final note here, the last thing that I want to mention is obviously, again, your risk profile is your risk profile. You can decide to not do any of the things I've suggested in this video. You can very well decide to go out there and just say, hey, I want to be surprised, do whatever you want, and that could work out great for you. But one thing I would keep in mind is, especially when you're playing with a new dom or a new top, if they have any kind of reputation in the scene, if they're an ethical player, Usually, if all they hear is surprise me, they are going to play very, very conservatively because they don't want to have any consent issues. They don't want to have any boundary issues. And so really, if you are looking for a more intense experience, the way to do that is not always through just giving up total and complete negotiation control. Sometimes it takes kind of spilling your guts out a little bit to help that get there. Not just saying do whatever you want, because again, ethical tops, ethical doms will not go as hard as they could possibly go when they're not really sure what the boundaries around the scene are, or like don't really know what the person they're playing with really wants. So those are the thoughts for today. Hopefully you guys found this video interesting and helpful. If you have any other questions, any thoughts you'd like to share, you can leave that down in the comment section below. And we do have live streams every Friday here on this channel, 6 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. So if you want to come and ask questions, always feel free to come and do that there. If you haven't already and you want to see more from me, please subscribe and make videos twice a week. And finally, if you really want to help this channel, if you want to see more from me, you can do that over on Patreon. That gives you guys access to a lot of exclusive perks, rewards, photo shoots, extra videos, video previews, all sorts of fun things. So if you haven't already, please check that out. Link will be down below. And very, very, very finally, just want to give a brief thank you to my patrons. If you already support me on Patreon, thank you so, so much. It means the absolute world to me. And until I see you guys next time, I hope you have a great rest of your day and a great rest of your week. Bye-bye.